be gold in that cardboard! I'll see myself out.
Eureka! That's a game. Specifically, it's a game which seems to go by quite a few different names depending on where you happen to be playing it, and it was made by German company Ravensburger Spieleverlag GmbH. Yeah, I'm just gonna call them Ravensburger from now on. Who, as far as I could gather, seem to be known more for making jigsaw puzzles, though they do seem to have other board games under their belt as well. Can't say it's a name I've heard of either, so I'll be eager to see what kind of a first impression they make. Also, the side of the box notes that the game was made by Ravensburger for Discovery Toys, but much like Ravensburger themselves, I wasn't able to find all that much info on them. Honestly, at this rate, I'm more likely to actually strike gold before digging up anything on the developers, so let's just get to the game itself. Much like Survive, the top of the box for Eureka has a very nicely painted illustration which details all the major gameplay elements, specifically a gold miner panning for gold, a robber, and the train, all in one pleasantly understated scene. Top marks. Or should I say, a gold star? I'll stop now. Going back to the side of the box for a moment, I can't help but notice that the good people at Ravensburger decided to slap an oddly specific age recommendation onto the game. Now, normally, you look at the box of a major board game like Monopoly or Chutes and Ladders, you'll see a recommendation like ages 3 and up, 5 and up, 10 and up, and so on. You might even see something like ages 8 to adult, but rarely do you see an actual upper limit on those recommendations. Here, however, the box notes that Eureka is specifically for those between the ages of 8 and 99. Which means if you turn 100, then congratulations, you have officially survived a century. But this game is no longer for you! Go back to bingo, you plebe! Taking a look at the bottom of the box is sadly impossible with my copy, as there's nothing there, which would seem to be an odd fluke if a glance through the pictures on Board Game Geek is anything to go by. Judging from what should have been there, the bottom's not too shabby either, showing a shot of a game in progress with a simple blurb describing the game. All around, a nice box. Taking a look at the board, we see that apparently Ravensburger were damn proud of this game and really wanted you to know they made it, as evidenced not just by their logo in the bottom corner of the board, but by the fact that if you flip the board over, their name is the frickin' only thing you can see. Anyway, turning our attention back to the play area, we could see a desert valley as our setting this time around, the most prominent features of which are a group of houses, which serve as the home basis for each player, and a lone railroad track which emerges from a tunnel at the top right corner of the board and winds its way into the cluster of houses. A hexagonal grid over most of the board marks the individual spaces over which players can move. However, the grid is noticeably absent in each of the 3 small lakes, which can be problematic for reasons we'll get into later. Player tokens in Eureka take the form of 6 wooden prospector figures. Other than their individual coloring, they don't have any detailing, and to be honest, I don't think they need it. They get the job done well enough as they are. And of course, you can't have a railroad without a train. Well, I suppose you could, but what would be the point? Anyway, this game has a train, and it's represented by a train! How ingenious! Like the prospectors, no detailing other than the color, and, well, at least it actually looks like a train, unlike the mod of the game for Tabletop Simulator, where the train is just a simple block of wood. Next, you've got one single wooden die to take care of movement, among other things. It's a fairly standard D6 as well, save for the fact that the 1 has an outline of a train around it, and that's not just for aesthetics, it actually has significance to the gameplay as well. Then we come to the most abundant of the pieces, these cardboard chips, 74 in total. The majority of them have a number of gold nuggets on them, while others have robbers, both of which are what you'll be after as you play the game. However, some of them are totally blank, and these are referred to in the instructions as spare chips. It's not made specifically clear how you're meant to use these. I'm guessing you're meant to just write or draw whatever you need to on them in case you lose an actual nugget or robber chip, but still, it's nice to see some foresight on the part of the developers because, let's face it, these are on the small side and could easily get lost if you're not careful. Although, that does make it all the more weird when we come to the last item on the piece list. And that would be these, rafts, 8 in total. Why is this strange, you might ask? Well, not only do the instructions say there are only supposed to be 6, but they make no mention whatsoever of spare rafts. Yet they are included on the board from which you punch out the 10 spare nugget chips. Per the instructions, the first thing you'll want to do when setting up a game is to place the board in the middle of the table.
No, seriously, this is important. I absolutely cannot stress this enough. It has to be in the middle of the table. If you try and put it on the side, it ain't gonna work. You silly person, you. Now, with the board placed precisely so, the next bit is where it gets a bit time-consuming, even if you do have other people helping.
You take each of the 64 robber and gold nugget chips and place them face down on a hexagon which has a mining hole. Or, sorry, a minig hole. And you'll forgive me if I speed this bit of the video up, as doing this in real time takes roughly 3.5 minutes. With all the chips placed, all that's left to do is to place a raft in the water wherever there's a wooden post, choose a prospector and place him on the appropriately colored house, place the train at the start of the track, and you're all set to go gold mining! Ah, damn it, I did it again. The youngest player begins by throwing the die. Once the die is thrown, if you roll the 1, then you simply move the train 1 space along the track, and that's it, your turn is done. However, if the die shows any of the other numbers, then you move the appropriate number of spaces.
Obviously, your first move will be to leave your house, since of course that's where you start the game. One thing to note is that when leaving your house, you can only do so through the front door. In other words, via one of the 2 hexagons in front of your house. Same with coming back in, you can only do so through one of those 2 hexagons. No crawling through the back window like a damn savage in this game.
One stipulation the instructions have regarding movement, which seems a bit odd to me, is that you can hit the same space more than once while moving, but only as long as you're not simply jumping back and forth between 2 spaces. Instead, you have to take a more roundabout way to do so. Not really sure why it matters, though. I mean, you'll be hitting the space one way or the other anyway.
Much better. Anyway, the chips are placed on the board in such a way that for your first couple of turns or so, depending on where you are and where you're trying to go, once you've moved, that's it. Your turn's over and play proceeds to the player on the left. The real game begins once you start finding gold chips. When you land on a chip, the first thing you do is flip it over to reveal what it is. If it's gold, then you place it on the table in front of you. Each gold chip is worth 1 point for every nugget on it. So for instance, this one has 4 nuggets on it, so it's worth 4 points. You can also score points by capturing robbers, but more on that in a bit. From this point, you can use your future turns to go looking for more gold or capture more robbers if you want. Or try to get what gold and robbers you've already found back to your house, which you will want to do at some point, because there are all sorts of ways to lose everything you have so long as you have chips on the table in front of you. The only way to secure everything you have is to get back to your house and store all your chips inside like that.
So let's talk about those robbers, shall we? Because don't forget, there's a few of those mixed in with the gold nuggets. If you should uncover a robber, then you immediately enter into a duel with the varmint, with the winner getting your gold. Each robber has a number from 1 to 5 on his hat. Upon flipping over a robber, you roll the die. If you roll higher than the number on the robber's hat, you capture that robber and place him on the table in front of you. Each captured robber is worth 2 points. Rolling the 1 in this case simply counts as a 1, you don't move the train, and in the case of ties, you roll again. However, if you should roll lower than the robber's number, then you place all your gold and captured robbers that are in front of you onto the space of the robber you were dueling, and you put the victorious robber on top of the pile. You then move away from that robber by the number of spaces showing on the die, and once you've moved, your turn is over right then and there. If you land on a chip, you leave it where it is, and the robber and all the loot he stole is up for grabs by anyone that lands on him in the future.
But the robbers aren't the only ones you have to protect your stuff from. There are other people you can lose it to as well. Namely, other players.
If you land on a space occupied by another miner, then you immediately enter into a duel with the varmint, with the winner getting— Wait, didn't we already do this? Seriously though, fighting with another miner works in much the same way as with the robbers. First, the attacking player, i.e. the player trying to move into the already occupied space, rolls the die, followed by the defending player. Whoever has the higher number takes all the losers' gold and robbers and places those chips in front of them with the rest of their stash. Then, the winning player, again, not the loser of the duel in this case, the winner of the duel, rolls the die again and moves away by the number on the die while the loser stays in that space. As with the robbers, ones count as one and don't affect the train, and chips are to be left alone if you land on one when moving away from a duel.
You can even lose your stash to the train, of all things, if you're not careful. You see, when you roll a 1 during normal play, you are considered to be the temporary engineer of the train. In other words, you're in charge of it for that turn. Now, if another player should be foolish enough to have stopped on the tracks and they're standing specifically on the space that you need to move the train to, then the poor schmuck on the tracks moves one space behind the train, and all their gold and robbers go to the engineer. And in this case, there's no chance of defending the loss, you're just SOL.
So yeah, gold mining is a risky business. Who'd thunk it? But there are a couple of opportunities to get a bit of breathing room from time to time.
For one thing, you can straight up pass on your turn altogether if you so choose. A nice touch, but not without its problems. I'll get into that later. But there's also the rafts. Thought I forgot about them, didn't you? What was I talking about?
Rafts are the only way to cross the lakes on the board and can serve as a nice handy shortcut. To use a raft, you must first land on it via an exact die roll. Then you move the raft, with you aboard, to any bank of the lake that is directly across from where the raft was when you boarded, and after moving you stay on the raft until your next turn, and during that interim, you and your stash are safe from other players, as only one player may occupy a raft at one time.
You remember earlier how I expressed concern at the lack of a grid on the lakes? Well, without a grid, it can be a little hard to discern what can be considered an opposite bank from where you are. And in some instances, this can, and indeed, in a game I played with the R gang, did lead to a debate over what exactly constitutes a legal use of the raft. The game can end in one of two ways. The most likely way is when the train reaches the last space on the track, at which point all the players count up all the nuggets and robbers in their house. Again, gold nuggets are worth 1 point for every nugget on the chip, and robbers are worth a flat 2 points, and anything in front of the players when the game ends doesn't count. The game can also end when there aren't any more nuggets out in the field, regardless of where the train is.
I like this game, I really do, for one simple reason. It's one of those games where it ain't over till it's over. There's rarely, if ever, a foregone conclusion as to who's going to win. There's always the chance that a player could sneak in at the last minute and steal another player's gold. You're always invested in the game and never just going through the motions.
Still not perfect, though. The instructions are pretty comprehensive and do a good job of covering mostly everything you need to know about the game, but there are still a scant few ambiguities. Ties, for instance. What happens if the game ends at a tie score? In the few games that I've played of this, it never came up, but it is still more than possible. Yet the rules are mum on the subject.
As for other unclear situations, you have to land on a raft via an exact roll. Okay, cool, I can understand that. What about your house, though? Even though I imagine having to enter and exit only via the 2 hexagons in front make it tricky enough, no mention is made in the instructions over whether an exact roll is needed.
And considering your house is the only safe haven for your gold and captured robbers, I would have thought if anything, that would need an exact roll.
Then there's the bit in the instructions about passing your turn. The manual says, a player can always pass on throwing the dice and moving.
Really? Always? I mean, that's literally the only thing the manual says about passing, so by that logic, what's to stop a game from ending in a deadlock with all the players going, I gotta move? There needs to be some element of risk in any game or it's not gonna work. And I think a little more clarity with the passing rule would have gone a long way here. In fact, I seem to remember the R gang and I came up with a house rule that you could only pass a certain number of turns in a row before you had to move on your next turn. As far as finding Eureka and for how much, it would seem I really did strike gold here, as I found it at a local antique store for $5. Now, if you can't find it near you, then you can try eBay or Amazon, but be warned. I didn't find that many copies when I looked, and those I did find were very expensive indeed. The lowest price I saw was around $21, but you're more than likely going to be paying somewhere around $35 to $100, and that's not even taking shipping into account. And so ends another glimpse into board game Obscura. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to doing it again next time. Jikai made. Sayonara.